Hi, I'm Bill Patton with 720 Degree Coaching, and it's my distinct pleasure to have on the show today Bruce Gullickson. We're going to talk about him and maybe a little bit about the Gullickson family, but our topic for today is going to be how to be a great listener on the court. Now, one thing I would really like you to do right now is smash that like button. When you like this video, it goes out to more people. So if you want to help me out, do that. If you're watching these things a lot, if you wouldn't mind, go into my Patreon and maybe donating $1 a month or something, I'd really like to cover the cost of the Zoom subscription. But anyway, so please subscribe and like. That helps the channel immensely. And now we're going to get right into it with Bruce. How you doing today, Bruce?
I'm doing great, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day here. It's going to be 80 degrees here in Northern California. Where are you located?
I'm in Minneapolis, a south suburb called Burnsville. So it could be about 20 degrees cooler than you, but still nice, 60 degrees.
Yeah, no, that's good. Okay, so tell us a little bit about you and growing up, learning how to play tennis, and,
Sure.
We can get into a little bit about the Gullickson family. We can do that too.
Yeah, well, my cousins were my inspiration for starting to play. I was a late bloomer. I didn't start playing till I was in ninth grade. And because when they started going on the tours, kind of when I got interested in it, although it never surprised me that they were successful, because when they were little kids, they were always in the lacrosse newspaper. So, when you're young, you always just think somebody's in the newspaper. They're a pro anyway. But then I played high school tennis, and I went to Gustavus, and I played a little bit my freshman year with the great Steve Wilkinson, but played intramurals there. And, I wanted to be a school teacher, but my real passion was I wanted to coach high school tennis. And so one thing led to another and got certified, and been teaching for over 30 years now.
Awesome. Thank you for being succinct there. So I wasn't sure if you were a brother or a cousin, but
they're my dad's brother's sons, and it's kind of funny because my dad and their dad were they were like twins, because their father had scarlet fever when he was young, and so from second grade on, they went to school together in the same grade, so they were very tight.
Yeah, well, it's obvious that the familial appearance. I mean, you definitely have a strong resemblance in the family there, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, so you also have done some stuff with high school tennis in terms of creating materials, right? Because I've seen your stuff with Championship Productions.
Yep.
What are some of those things that you've made?
Well, I've produced, I think, 5 DVDs for Championship Productions, everything from drills for club pros, high school tennis, with a high school tennis video or DVD produced years ago with Steve Paulson, who is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Steve, but he may be the winningest high school coach in America. He just retiring from high school coaching this year, won his 23rd state title with the girls at Edina, which is, I think his coaching record is over 900 wins and maybe 7 or 10 losses. So extremely successful coach.
That's amazing. You could break your calculator with that guy. And I have heard of him. And so, high school coaches, no matter how successful they are usually sort of under promoted. But I heard about Steve through Erwin Montalvo.
Yep.
So, and he was like,
with Erwin the other day.
Yeah. So there's your Erwin Bebe Montalvo.
Well, so he's got to give a like, that's for sure.
You better. Anyway, so let's get into this topic of coaches and listening and learning, and we'll start with the example of the 2 posts that I had the other day. So
sure.
So Monday I posted, or maybe it was Tuesday, I posted a video that was 51 seconds long, and it showed me doing a couple of things with a player. And then I asked, what do you see here, right?
Right.
And the responses were interesting because people just launched off with giving their opinion. right?
Exactly.
And so what was your observation about how all of that ensued?
Well, it was interesting because, I went the positive route. So I looked at he had good extension and follow through. But, to go deeper, the correct answer was you were questioning him and getting information from, and he was learning through that way, which is good. And you simplified the technique. But most people were criticizing, well, this isn't good, or why he's throwing from that angle, and so on and so forth, without understanding the purpose.
Yeah, and so why do people do that? And how do we learn how to actually stop, look, and listen? What is there a way to make that transition?
Well, I think two things. I think sort of human nature to be a little negative by nature, because if you have somebody, let me take a look at your serve, and you hit 10 serves and you make 9 of them and then they miss one, they go, see, what's wrong with it? It's like, well, you breathe oxygen and you bleed red. It's like you're human, you're going to miss sometimes. So we don't accept errors. And the other thing is, I think we're so technically geared in this country to always diagnose technique and not necessarily look at other issues that may, for instance, last year I just got Racket Fit certified. And I think that's a big game changer, looking at how mobility and stability and strength can affect technique and strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought so. I did a follow-up video, basically, you know, observing what I saw in the behavior of coaches, and how quickly they launch off with their opinions. So why is it that people come with opinions, though? I mean, I understand, and it's true, 70% of people's self-talk is negative.
Right.
It is the default position is that we're going to look at things negatively. And some people say that goes back to hunter and gatherers, that safety was always an issue because you never knew, if there was some predator, about to attack you or whatever, or, were you going to be able to score today's meet out on the range?
Right.
So, but why do people give opinions? Where does that come from?
Well, that's a great question. I'm not exactly sure why, but everybody seems to have them. My cousin Tom had a great quote when he was up here for a conference a couple months ago, and he said, tennis must be the easiest coach in the world, or the easiest sport in the world to coach, because everybody is one. It's like referring to parents and participants. Everybody's a coach. Everybody tells you what's wrong.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So, I think it comes back to maybe having a little too big of an ego.
Yes.
Because I think one of the weirdest things is I've been told ever since I was a teenager that I'm teachable.
Yeah.
And I always took that as a real supreme compliment. And I guess part of the reason for that was I was always curious and always knew that there was more out there to learn. I don't know. I think for me, part of it was being influenced by Carl Sagan and Albert Einstein and, a lot of the great minds, and really watching that stuff and going, wow, these guys know so much. And they still admit that they don't know very much at all.
Exactly. Well, since you're on that path, an interesting book is called The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin, who the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer was based on. And he claims, because he's a world champion in Tai Chi as well as a grandmaster chess champion, and he says he's not more talented than anybody else, but what he's talented at is knowing how to learn. And a lot of people, coaches included, don't really know how to learn. We don't observe well, listen well, maybe read enough, those kind of things.
Okay, so let's do. I have a joke first, and then we'll dig a little more into that. So I was thinking about what an oxymoron it is to beat someone at Tai Chi.
Yeah.
How do you defeat someone?
But, apparently there's a physical competition in it. Just like Tim Ferriss, was the I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Ferriss and the 4 hour body and 4 hour work week. And, he's world champion in tango and judo, but the judo, he just found a loophole in the rules, because he was observant and was at a extreme weight advantage in his division. And so he won. I don't think he's necessarily claims to be the greatest judo expert, but he had a definite size advantage.
That's an interesting, yeah. Okay. So let's dig into observation, because, right now we're probably also preaching to the choir, because the people who are already good listeners are probably vitally interested in getting better.
Right.
How do we reach the people who aren't the greatest observers?
Again, another great question. I think sometimes just through common experience, or like I was just talking with somebody yesterday, and I said, if somebody can show me a better way, I'll adopt it and I'll admit to it. My pride will be hurt at first, but I'm not a dummy. I'll come around in short order, maybe not that exact moment, but relatively soon, within a day or two, and say, you know what, that's a better way, or I was doing it wrong, or I could do it better, because you always should be looking to tinker and improve. And that's one thing that's kind of interesting when everybody talks about the quote unquote modern game, whether it's tennis or basketball or anything, because certain things have gotten better, but certain things have actually degressed over the years because they aren't emphasized as much.
Yeah. I think one way I keep my Teflon coating on is by not ever admitting that I was ever wrong. Yeah. No, and I think that's important. That's important for me. One thing I learned from a professor that I really liked was the concept of the plus delta. Right. So you find the positives; those are the pluses, right? You look at what's positive, and then the deltas aren't things that are wrong necessarily. They're just areas that can be improved.
There you go. I like
that. And then it's not as much a criticism. So if we look at ourselves and we go, all right, I'm in process, and I just want to continue to be in the process of improving. So I'm always going to be looking for something that's better than what I'm currently doing.
Right.
Hey, why does that guy do that? That looks stupid.
Yeah.
So, okay, and here's a good example. Okay, Ken DeHart, who you mentioned, before we got started here, called me and he said, and he never calls me. So if Ken's calling me, it's something important, right? So he says, Bill, you got to look at this iCoach thing. And I'm thinking, what is it? Is it an app? Does it go with your iPhone?
Right.
iCoach, right?
Yep.
I'm like, what is it? What is it? And so he's like, no, you got to see it. You got to see what it is. And so anyway, so I get to the event where they have the iCoach, and I'm like, and I have one sitting right there that I'm going to look at with disgust. That looks stupid. It's a tee.
Right.
It's a tee. It's a ball sitting in space. So what? That looks really stupid, right? Yeah. But now I've seen the light.
Yeah.
So, and I've got 3 of them, So, that's an example. Because I have to admit, my own natural reaction is to take a critical view of things. So, but then, but I gave it a chance. I'm like, okay, let's see how this works and why it's important and all that. And now my kids love it. The ones that I'm teaching really love that thing. So what's another way that we kind of break through that?
Well, I think partly through experience, because I remember when I was a very young pro, I'm kind of ancient now, long in the tooth, but you kind of accepted everything that, if Dennis Vandermeer said this, or if, George Basio said that, it's got to be true, but it's not necessarily true. Like even the great Vic Braden, rest in peace, he based things on science, but sometimes the science changes or the methodology changes. And so it's not necessarily, wasn't wrong, but it was, the incorrect approach. And so you just have to constantly be growing, because now I'm to the stage where I can question somebody, but respectfully, because you don't criticize. I think the problem is people criticize the person. If I do a drill and you disagree with it, you can blast the drill, but you shouldn't blast me because maybe you don't understand the reason, or maybe it is a bad drill, but people
Right.
too personal, I think.
Right. Well, and I'll give you an example of that. So I was at Stanford for a convention, and there are 150 people in this lecture hall. And a guy gets out a 19-slide presentation on how to hit a forehand.
Yep.
So I turned to the guy next to me. I said, I'm not going to teach this. I mean, it's way too analytical. It's over the top analytical. So I'm sorry. So I think you also have to know what's not going to fit with you and what you're not going to accept to some extent. So I actually turned to the guy and said, hey, I'm going to take a little nap here. If I start snoring, tap me, wake me up when it's over. But sometimes we get that too. I mean, you have to also have a filter.
Oh, there's no question. And I think also you have to be adaptable because, if you were to look at an Ernst Gulbis forehand or, Francois Dur backhand, you would say, well, this person's crap, and I mean, Gulbis, I think he beat Nadal 6-0 in a set on clay, right? And Francois Dur maybe in the International Tennis Hall of Fame. So it's like not necessarily common, but for those individuals, it worked.
Yeah. Well, and who is the French guy with slice on both sides, two-handed backhand?
That was Santoro, and Barris hit with both sides.
Right.
Of the racket.
So, so there's a lot of room for pretty extreme idiosyncrasies.
Absolutely.
Was Santoro, did the French Federation embrace him, or did they kind of kick him to the curb because his game was...
I think when they did talent ID camps, I think he flunked out, but he had the last laugh. He was extremely successful and maximized what he had. And I think that's a mistake a lot of coaches make, is that, not everybody is a Michael Jordan and 6'6" and can run a 4.38 40. It's like some people play for different reasons. You might want to play to beat your father. You might want to play to make the high school team. You might want to play to look cool. You might want to play to make the tour or play in college. There's all kinds of
factors. You just opened something up right there. That's good. Okay, so this is old data from on-court, off-court, way back. And so, but I think it's still true. 80% of people who go out to play tennis simply want to rally the ball over the net one more time.
Yeah, I would agree.
They have a friend and 2 rackets and 2 tennis balls, and they're going to go and they're going to hit for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, get some exercise, and go home having never played a point.
Yeah, I see that quite often.
Okay. So we need to cater those people. I get a pretty large percentage of my lessons are people who come once or twice and they just want to rally a little bit better, and then they go away. And I want my residual money from the TIA for having created a casual tennis player.
Well, there you go.
Okay. So how do we miss those people, or what can we do to boost up the people who just want to rally and be on their way?
I think I run a class that I based on some Emilio Sanchez training called Spanish Core, and it's a 4-person max on a court. And it's, I'm not a huge dead ball proponent, but in this particular class, I wouldn't really call it dead ball because they're doing simulated points, but in sequences of 8 to 12 shots, and there's just bam, 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 somebody's picking up, somebody's hitting, somebody's shadowing, somebody's resting, and you can get the fittest athlete, and they hit a lot of balls and they're tired. And my experience has been actually the better the player, the more exhausted they get because they're really moving their feet and hitting the ball. But, and I've incorporated some new chains where we even do a little serve and volley, but, they serve, but I feed the volleys and they know where the ball is going to go and working on moving on an angle. So you can get, it's like cardio tennis. You can get the exercise and get some tennis skills at the same time.
And I like that. So that I find that surprising, right? And so drills done right can be fun, right? And can build skills.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
So now another group of people, the next largest group of people are the ones who just want to play social doubles with their friends on a Saturday or a Sunday morning for a couple of hours and then go mow the lawn or have a Michelob Light or 2 or 5 or however many.
Yeah, pandemic times, maybe more.
Yes, perhaps. So how do we reach those people more? Because I think what we do is we're so focused on, are these people going to be future USTA league players or league players of some type? How do we better reach those people?
Well, I think playing in with them sometimes, and you modify your skill to the people you're playing with, but just showing them some, like I always look at it as, you want to maximize what a person has or what they want to do. So like my big catchphrase is the party's at the net, but not everybody needs to be at the net at all times. They shouldn't come in on a mindless shot, but like I'll show them, for instance, like say you have a 3-0 social player, you know what, instead of hitting your service return really deep, what would happen if you just dumped it short cross court because the other person's not coming to the net, and they go like, wow, that works, and it's like a closer target, it's an easier shot, and it's much more effective than if they hit it back to the person who's not going to come in anyway. So basically they're starting with a drop and hit. So just showing them some strategic things, again, like Ken DeHart ism, like if you're getting lobbed all the time, which is the nightmare of most club level doubles players, well, you're hitting the ball too deep. It's like if you hit, I discovered that the hard way at 4-5 Nationals a few years ago at Indian Wells, because the courts were so slow. My partner and myself were hitting volleys probably a foot from the baseline, but the courts were so slow, the guys could just wail on the ball, and we have really good hands, but we're old. We couldn't touch the ball because they could then the 2 years later, we went back and hit the ball short around the service line and low, and they couldn't pass and they couldn't lob. So as much.
Well, I want to go back to what you said about playing in, because that's, if you're especially if you're a director or a head pro, if you jump on a doubles court with your members, you're going to make an impact on their lives. They're going to really enjoy that, and and even, I mean, just as a fun thing, just go play a set with somebody. So we had this guy, Murray.
One second. I'll be back in 1 second.
Okay, I'll tell my story while you're gone.
All right.
So we had this guy, Murray, who he was like 83 years old, and he hadn't won a set in like 10 years. So Murray hadn't won a set in 10 years. So in the rotation, all the old guys are playing, and it's like everybody has to take turns playing with Murray. Yeah. And the game within the game was, can you win a game with Murray on your team, right? Because you're not going to win the set because he hasn't won a set in 11 years, right? So anyway, so I jump in there with Murray, and I kind of played center field.
Sure.
So I'm very close to the center tee to start every point, whether I'm, it's so anyway. So as soon as I serve, I go in to the middle of the court and play everything. Yeah. And then if he's returning, I'm very close to the center. And I just went, hey, if you don't know what to do, just lob. Right. All the way over the net person, all the way to the baseline. And I'll take over from here. So I probably hit, 20 overheads in that set. But anyway, Murray and I won the set, and he almost cried.
Yeah, great experience.
I mean, he was so happy. He had not won a set in a long, long time. So, consider that if you're on court. I mean, hey, you really ought to make the rounds and try to play a set with everybody. And if you're with your 2-5 ladies, play left-handed.
Absolutely.
And then,
Then
you know, and
ask them
then,
if they notice you played left-handed, you know, because that's your individual training. That's a big experience
well,
too.
the way I play left-handed, it's pretty obvious when it comes to
Well,
serving.
I would think
So,
so too when I play left-handed, but it's surprising. A lot of people don't, well, you're just a little off today or something. It's like,
yeah.
no,
And if they get insulted, then I go, well, you have to beat me left-handed before you get to play me
exactly.
right-handed. Come on now. So,
Exactly.
and then if depending on the group, I might also talk a lot of trash.
Well, there you go.
If they
Yep.
can handle it, then I'll throw in a little, I'm beating you left-handed.
Yep. Yep. I love it.
but
And the
but anyway,
members do enjoy that.
but that comes back to listening and observing, right? Because with
Exactly.
some people, they don't want you to play left-handed ever because they find it insulting, and you have to read your people really well.
That's right.
All right, so let's dial a little deeper into what are some of the skills of observing.
Well, I think number one is to look at the whole picture, and maybe even beyond the player, the court, you know, the position. Is most people just focus on the racket or the actual arm, the swing path, because I know it's a generality, but like the European coaches or South American coaches probably look more at the lower body, and the American coaches tend to look more at the upper body or the arm. But you know, again, could be, geez, do they have tight ankles? You know, what's the trajectory of the ball approaching them? What's their intent? You know, and like you say, asking questions. You know, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Because it might not be what I would like you to accomplish, but we're not in it for me. We're in it for you. So that's good customer service if you can service the member and help them reach their goals, not necessarily your goals.
Yeah. So I had a funny one the other a couple months ago. I had this gal, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to show you how to serve like Serena. Now here's your forehand like Federer, and then you know we're going to do this like so and so. And then she said, hey, you know, just so you know, I don't know who any of these people are,
Right.
nor do I care. So
Right.
you can drop all that, you know, be like Mike stuff. And I'm like,
Yeah.
all right,
There you
all
go.
right.
At least she
I
was
can not.
honest, you know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that because it just wasn't jiving with her. Some people really love that stuff.
Oh yeah, everybody has a different learning style and a different personality. Again, going back to the great Vic Braden, I believe in his book Tennis for the Future, he was talking when he was a young pro. He had a guy who was really athletic, and he's like, "Gosh, I don't understand it. You look so athletic, and you know you're just not very successful. I don't get it." And he goes, "Well, Vic, if you let me use my left hand, I'm I'm really good." And Vic had made everybody put the racket in their right hand to play. So even somebody as good as him had to learn, okay, there's not everybody's a righty.
That's a pretty embarrassing mistake from the master there.
Oh yeah.
So
Well, he was
that's
young, so you got to give him a little leeway there. But you know, it's funny because people do make some. Yeah, I've seen women's daytime league players, and the gal's like 8 months pregnant, and they don't notice, or you know, people hit two hands on both sides. Funny story. I had a member who I still hit with his days, a retired engineer, and he's always tweaking with his game, and he's actually quite good left-handed, but he's a righty, and he'll take 1 year and the year of the backhand or the year of the forehand. Well, anyway, 1 year he was hitting just forehand, so left-handed forehand, right-handed forehand, and I had him play a junior who was a good junior who went on to play number one for Valparaiso, and my guy beat him, and I said, well, hit it to his backhand, and my guy never figured out he didn't have a backhand. He had two forehands.
oh that's interesting. That's blackmail stuff later. You can anytime that person's ever giving you in trouble, you go, remember that match where you couldn't find the backhand?
Exactly.
So all right. You know, another thing too is when people are observing, I think players sometimes observe the result of their shot too much, and they
Exactly.
have all these subjective judgments. So I think two things happen. We obsess on the result of the shot,
Yep.
and we obsess on the stroke,
I
right?
absolutely 100%
Um,
agree.
and yet that's all at the end of the system. So one thing I'm trying to teach people to do is is help people at the front of the system, and that is reading the ball out of the opponent's racket. So,
Yeah.
so those people who saw the video that I did where I was tossing the ball, I said to the kid, see the ball come out of my hand.
Right.
And that can be magic, but everybody's looking at everything else except that I'm teaching the beginning of the system.
Exactly.
And then the other thing is I got all sorts of criticism for feeding the ball at a 45-degree angle.
Right.
But one of my heroes in coaching is Jack Brody, who has an amazing system.
Tennis, the 8-board.
Well, I put him in my top 5 most influential coaches who've affected my teaching style, philosophy. So anyway, so his whole thing is, if you observe closely, great players all make contact approximately 45 degrees away from their body.
Right.
And so I toss it 45 degrees because it forces a new player to make contact at 45 degrees. Otherwise, it's going to be an abject failure. So, so that's the intent behind that. But people are thinking, their first thought is to look at that and say, I wouldn't do that.
Exactly.
So and it's funny, in that thread now, I think 10 people have said, oh, I don't like that feeding angle. And so then I have gone back to them and said, why do you think I'm doing that?
Right.
And there hasn't been a lot of follow-up.
No, I have an acronym called RIF. It used to be a government program, and I always ask people, what does RIF stand for? It's reading is fundamental. So, and, it's not only just for the students, it's also when you're observing coaches, it's like, what is it that they're trying to do? Because sometimes you should ask them, instead of just thinking, well, that was a bad lesson because Bill was trying to do this, and you might have been 180 degrees different as to what you were trying to do, but nobody ever bothered to ask you. So they're just making a judgment, a rush to judgment, and not a really thorough, in-depth observation.
That's a great comment. So, all right, now, when it comes to listening, I think what we've just covered is sort of the visual aspect of it.
By the way, I'm trying to put in a plug for your book on visual training.
Okay, and hey everybody, I wrote a book called Visual Training for Tennis. Check it out. And then also, I'm in the midst of creating courses for that. So there's going to be an online course, and I'm going to start doing some webinars on visual training for tennis. So anyway, but thanks for that. Anyway, I hadn't planned on that. You kind of caught me off guard. That doesn't happen very often. So now let's talk more about listening, because, observing is huge, and we need to really stop and survey the situation with our eyes. And then where does listening come in, and how can we more effectively listen to players, parents, and other coaches?
Well, I think it's hugely important. There used to be, I don't know what company it eventually became, but Sperry Rand used to have whole courses in listening for their employees. But listening goes beyond just even the players and the coaches and the parents. One thing I always try to point out to my students is listen to the ball. Because it's like, why do the players get upset when the airplanes fly overhead? It's not that they can't focus. They have great focus. They can't hear the ball. And, that little edge in terms of, because a 120-mile-an-hour serve and an 80-mile-an-hour serve can look exactly the same, especially if a very talented server, a la Federer or Sampras. But if you can't hear it, it's much harder to judge. So it's listening from that standpoint. And especially, I teach primarily indoors 9 months a year, so you can really tell if a ball's, like I tell people, I can tell you with my eyes closed whether you hit topspin or slice or flat or miss hit it. It's like and just pay attention, kind of Chevy Chase, be the ball from Caddyshack or whatever.
All right, and so I'm glad you said that. So if we go back to this video that I posted, right? What did I do? I mean, the kid mishit. He had a really bad miss hit, and it went clunk on the racket. It might not have presented really well over the speaker of my phone, but to he and I, it was quite audible. This very chunky shot, right? So see, and then what hopefully people would have observed or listened to was me asking him the question, instead of telling him what to do. Exactly. Oh, you mishit, you need to get the ball in the middle of the strings. No. Evan, what just happened? Why did you miss that? Why did that ball do what it did? I don't know. Well, where in your racket did it hit? Right? And so then I was kind of guiding him, but he still had to do the thinking. He had to answer the questions.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
and even that, like when you ask, because you want to kind of center your racket, but the actual, most of the top players, they hit the ball a little bit above the center of the racket, not dead center, and like I tell people, the reason they put lead tape on is to move the sweet spot up on the racket because they're hitting it a little bit above center, not directly in the center. So. And
I don't know if you've seen Richard Hosse's book. Richard Hosse's book is pretty amazing. It's 5.0 Secrets. And he gets into the advantage of hitting the ball higher up on the frame. Okay. And ultimately, so yeah, whenever I don't use the word sweet spot anymore. Right. I say ideal place to hit. And with a beginner is going to hit in the sweet spot. That serves them best.
Absolutely.
But yes, as you advance, you're going to hit the ball further out. And the rationale is that you actually gain more control in the deader part of the racket further up. Right. And then not only that, but you also get more racket head speed when you take the ball further away. So you make up any loss of power that you might have had, for not hitting in the node.
Right.
So anyway, that was an interesting thing. I didn't think we were going to talk about that, but
well, there's another little interesting tidbit about listening too. Is from a strategic standpoint, oftentimes your opponent will tell you how to beat them if you just listen and don't focus on yourself. I can't hit that bleeping backhand, or I hate high balls to this spot, or I remember I played a guy in a USPTA Nationals in Florida years ago, and I think my grip has modified a bit since, but at the time I had a continental forehand. He chucked his racket against the fence and said, "How the hell can I lose to somebody playing the continental forehand?" I knew the match was over then because you're just about to.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing, and I can relate to that. So yes, absolutely. I mean, and you don't necessarily have to listen to their words, but the noises they make, and then go, why are they growling, right? They used to say, as if you can get Boris cussing at himself in German, it's over.
Well, and then semantics too, because if you watch people's body language, like if you lob over somebody's head, you can tell if the ball landed in or not, regardless of what they call it, by how their shoulders droop. It's like, oh shoot. So body language is very important, and junior players especially. I know you do a lot with high school kids. Body language is huge because they tend to get too negative too early. It's like it's only 6 points into the match. You can't be hangdog already. You need to present a positive attitude.
Yeah, and I have another point too on listening. Whenever I go to a convention, I try to make sure I ask a question.
Yep.
And
presenters always appreciate that too, because quite often people go mute, whenever they're asked, any questions.
Right. But then the thing I try to do though is I try to think about what's something that maybe wasn't fleshed out enough in the presentation, because no presentation's ever perfect.
No.
Right. So as an aid to the speaker and as an aid to the audience, asking a question that you think other people probably also have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. This happened. I was in Irvine speaking, and a young guy asked a great question, but with maybe a little bit of a saucy tone of voice.
Right.
But as a speaker, I'm like, well, wait a minute, that's a great question. So I'm just going to focus on the content of the question and not kind of the attitude behind it. But you know, it was really great. And I was like, hey, that's a great question because you're helping me flesh that out. And if you're thinking that, there are probably 10 or 20 other people thinking the same thing.
Exactly. No, that's a very good observation because and it helps people in the audience, you know, learn better. I always try to be a demonstrator if somebody's doing something and they need volunteers because I find you learn better by actually performing the task at hand than just, you know, observing it from the sidelines.
Yeah. Well, you know, and a little further on that too. I mean, I think when I was younger, I was more intimidated by questions from people. But what do questions prove? That they're interested and they're listening and they're thinking. So it's a good thing. And there are sometimes that they ask me questions that I don't know the answer to.
Right.
And so I'm like, well, that's a really good question. I'm gonna have to think about that one. So, so those questions people have of us that show that they're listening to us are not a challenge in a bad way.
Yep.
They're a challenge in a good way for us to know our stuff. And there's nothing more satisfying than having a great answer, like immediately.
Oh, absolutely. And if you don't know the answer, I think it's best not to fake it, but, you know, say, I'll do some research, or, you know what, I know who would know that answer. You know, it's like, I would refer somebody to you, you know, about visual training more so than myself, because you have much more expertise in that matter. You know, it's okay. You know, one of the things that talk about listening and observing, one of the feathers in my hat from I'm involved in the Teaching Pro Association, USPTA, in the northern section, and a few years ago we got Magnus Norman to do a presentation up here, and as far as I'm aware, it's the only presentation at the time that he's ever done in the U.S., but I don't think he's ever done another one since. And people are like, well, how did you get Magnus Norman? And I said, real simple. Care to guess how I got Magnus Norman? I asked him. You know, that was, you know, I didn't know Magnus Norman. We were connections on LinkedIn. And I said, hey, would you ever consider coming to Minneapolis? And the great thing about Magnus is he's kind of a generalist, but like he knows a lot about a lot of things, but he doesn't claim to be the expert or the, you know, like he'll bring in coaches for Wimbledon to work with Stan because he is not the greatest grass court player in the world. But what he put a lot of work into his presentation. But the reason we were able to get him was because he was going to be in Detroit anyway the day before, because he had done this 30-hour course on human body and movement, you know, through the Gray Institute, and was getting certified in that. So it was just a hop, skip, and a jump to come to Minneapolis. It was a perfect storm.
That's awesome. Yeah. Did he win the French?
Magnus got to the finals. He lost to Gugu Querden.
Oh, man. But I remember he was one of the top clay court players for a while.
Yeah. I remember when he beat Sampras in, I think, the second round one year, and everybody's all, well, Pete's terrible on clay. How can he let him? And then the next year, the guy's 2 in the world. So it's like, again, rush to judgment sometimes. You know? Right.
But no, Magnus Norman is well noted for being one of the great coaches in the world. So kudos to you to get out there. Hey, I want to come to Minnesota.
Yeah, well, we'll I think we're booked for this. Well, let's plan on the following year. So 2022. Book it in your calendar.
I have a friend in Rochester, and so he's mad that I've never been to Minnesota.
Is that Ben Mays, or who's that?
No, he's a high school friend. He's not a tennis guy. But get me out there so I can go see my friend. Anyway, all right. So what more is there to say about listening or observing?
I just think that you can never perfect it, but you can always improve it. Is a good approach. You know, sometimes we have blinders on, and sometimes we have plugs in our ears. And if we're truly observant or interested in being, you know, plus it also shows you care about the other person, or you know, you might not agree with somebody, but at least show them the respect and the courtesy of being observant. And if you can't be, walk away.
Well, and I want to underline that too. So absolutely, it's true. I had a situation where I was newly coaching a team, and I had this one young girl coming in to the practice, and something was obviously wrong, and I said something to her, and she just gave me the stink eye, right?
Right.
And I'm like, all right, we're gonna have to deal with this. I mean, but see, if I had not observed that, or ignored it, or just brushed past it, then I would have lost an opportunity. So I pulled this gal aside, and I'm like, hey, are we okay?
Right.
I mean, is everything okay between us? Because, I saw the way you looked at me, and, it felt like daggers were coming out of your eyes. So, and she goes, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just having a bad day. Right? I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. Do you need to take a break or something? Because, I mean, I don't want you giving that eye to other people. So it felt like death, right? Yeah. So, but here's the funny thing. That was the moment that our relationship was created. And then that girl ended up being the most improved player in a 2-week span I've ever seen in my entire life. And she, so I don't want to go too far into that, but because I noticed, and then I took her aside to have that moment, then we were able to have a good relationship. So now, do you think listening and observing is the number one skill of coaches? Is there something that's more important?
Boy, that's right up there. It's certainly on the Mount Rushmore, if not the most important.
Mount Rushmore.
It's got to be there. So,
have you ever been to South Dakota to see that?
I have a couple of times. It's very impressive. I hope Crazy Horse will be finished in my lifetime, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Oh, wow. So they don't know how long it's going to take to finish that?
It's not going to happen for quite a while. There's lots of politics involved, but it's really going to be impressive. It's going to be way bigger than Mount Rushmore, but Mount Rushmore by itself is very, very impressive too. To think of the planning and the work going into that, it's just amazing.
All right, this is bonus coverage. So is it possible to see Crazy Horse in progress?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. So there's something to see currently.
Yeah, no, you can see part of it, but it's going to be massive. I mean, it's going to be like twice the size of Mount Rushmore.
Wow.
But I mean, it's going to take them, at the rate they're going, it's probably going to take them a couple hundred years.
All right. So now, where are you now, and what's kind of coming next for you around the corner here?
Well,
did you stop teaching for this?
Yeah,
or
we're on furlough right now for lifetime. So it's really anybody's guess as to when we get back out there, because Lifetime's great company, but it's got a unique setup in that it has so many members that it's just, there's a lot of variables compared to maybe like a single entity club where we have swimming and aerobics and weightlifting and racquetball and the whole shebang, and like entrances, how are we keeping things clean? Yeah, I mean, just lots of things that I'm sure haven't even been addressed. And I know, are you familiar with Neil Hagberg at all? Neil? He'd be a great interview for you sometime, especially in regards to sportsmanship and competition. But anyway, Neil's been running the Tennis and Life camps in St. Peter, Minnesota, very popular camps up here. They're 44 years old. Steve Wilkinson started them back in the 70s, but they just made the announcement yesterday that they're not running this year. So, I mean, that was really sad. So it hasn't peaked here yet. Every day the death toll goes up a little bit higher than the day before. So as far as my understanding, it's supposed to peak and level off for 10 days before you really get back to 100% normal. But
right. And so, okay, are you currently also coaching high school tennis still?
I don't coach high school anymore. I work with some junior players. I used to coach at Apple Valley High School, and I kind of came in with a class and stayed there for 5 years and saw them all graduate. And then that was a good time to leave. But I had a great experience coaching high school tennis, and even when I was in college, I coached junior high tennis and was assistant at the high school there. So I've had lots of experiences with high school tennis, and it's one idea. I don't know what you think about this, but I was thinking, in terms of growing high school tennis, that somehow, I know every high school has different rules regarding their state and their competition or whatever, but it would be kind of neat because, as far as I'm aware, there's no national high school tournament
Mm,
for like high schools, right? We're not talking
right.
USA tournament or this, that, because like I remember watching the movie Remember the Titans, and they say, well, the Titans finished #2 in the country, but how is that possible? Because they don't have a national high school football tournament or a national
Yeah,
high
it's
school
all
basketball.
based on polling and the,
Exactly,
very intricate web of head-to-head matchups and whatnot. But
but we really should have
but
a
there are
national high
some
school
there are
tournament.
some high-profile tournaments where you could come up with rankings, because I know that I think there's one in Maryland where they take
Right?
16 of the top programs around the country. So, like for instance, in my area, there's a school, Menlo Atherton, which
Yep.
gets invited to that, and then uh, depending on who's really good, Monte Vista High School might get invited to that. But they're getting invited to these elite tournaments. Here
Right.
in California, we have the California Classic, which is the largest high school tournament in the country, and they
Yep.
usually get 112 teams.
Wow.
Yeah, and everybody plays 5 matches in 2 days, so it's pretty awesome. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily agree that we need to have a national
Right.
championship to grow it, and high school tennis is growing if you believe the numbers.
Yeah.
So it's about to go over 350,000 players. Hopefully, what's happening now, this event that's going on, is not going to curtail that. But anyway, look, I want to wrap up with this.
Right.
Okay, so tell us the name of the facility where you are and what city it's in, and then also give us like a nice wrap up of a couple different things to bring it all home.
Sure. Well, I coach at Bloomington South Lifetime in Bloomington, Minnesota, and I'm the assistant tennis director there. Doug Matuska is our director and does a great job. In terms of, I've really enjoyed myself today. It was fun to chat with you and get to know you a little better. And I think listening and observation, great skills for everybody, not just tennis coaches, but people in the work, in any line of work, as hopefully government too, right? It's a great skill to have and to observe, and hopefully we're all interested in trying to better ourselves and improve our craft.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Bruce.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. It was a pleasure.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.